Hello, and welcome to another story reading of But I Are Friends by Elizabeth Obark. I'd like to just start off saying that I should have mentioned these things that I'm about to say right in the first video I did, which was the first two chapters of this book, so I'll just say them right now. So, one, sorry if my reading's not great, or if I don't speak loud enough, or I stammer over words or don't pronounce things right. And also, if I just kind of comment something, it's just because I really feel like this isn't a very professional story reading like you might know of. So it's just for books that maybe haven't been haven't had story readings, I guess. And I just like doing this. Also, I'm sorry if it confuses you if I do weird voices. It's just it's kind of my thing, and I just like making the voices different so you can kind of tell, because my mom always did that when I was a kid, so it's kind of passed on, and I think it's just a nice idea. So sorry if that's kind of confusing, but I'll work my best on that. And also, another thing that's important is that there's two characters in this, and they each have their own chapter. I kind of explained this last time, but they each have their own chapter. Yeah, every other chapter it will be the other character. So one time it will be McCall, and then the next time it will be Levi, and then so on and so on. So if you didn't get that, but you kind of know, because I'll change my voice a little bit for it. So my voices are great. And also, I mentioned this last time, I think, at the end, is that there's little dialogues kind of with them after every chapter and before every chapter, I guess. So that's what that is if you're kind of confused, if it's just it ends the chapter and this other thing starts. It's just, so you know. Anyway, enough rambling about that. Let's just get into the story then, shall we? Alright, let's start reading. Chapter 3. What if I got my hair cut? It was such a simple question, Levi asked, but he had no idea what a what-if question did to me. It was a game I played with myself often. I had been doing it a lot that summer before 8th grade. What if I hadn't been the one to show Levi around on his first day of school? What if I hadn't seen his keep calm and blind me on button and opened up a conversation to see what else we had in common? What if Uncle Adam had never mentioned Wednesday nights to Levi's mom? What if Mom wasn't always around when I needed her? But that's the thing with the what-if game. You really can never know the answer to the question, and maybe it's better that way. Because underneath the surface what-ifs are much worse ones. What if you haven't forgotten your science book that day? What if you hadn't forgotten your science book that day? What if it hadn't been raining? What if the other driver hadn't been texting? What if Mom had paused for even 3 seconds before leaving that day? What if? McCallan? Levi waved his hand in front of my face. What do you think? Levi removed the elastic from his hair and it fell a few inches down his back. I feel like I need a new start for 8th grade. I shrugged. Might be nice. Even a few of my buddies back home have finally cut their hair. Back home. I noticed that even though Levi had been here for nearly a year, and his parents had no plans to move back to California, he kept referring to California as back home, like he hadn't fully been able to accept that this was now his home. So? Levi asked. It was then that I realized that he had walked us to the hair salon at the mall. Right now? He hesitated for a few beats. Why not? 20 minutes later, he was seated in a chair, his hair back in its familiar ponytail. The stylist grabbed it and then worked her scissors across, and in a few short seconds, that ponytail came loose. Levi's hands went directly to the back of his head. So crazy. His voice sounded a little distant, like he couldn't believe it himself. The stylist then handed me the hair. I studied it, thinking about how long he'd been growing it out, about how Levi had this whole other life before I met him. It hit me then about what it must have been like to really start over. In some ways, I felt like I'd had to start over the accident, but I still woke up in the same bed, went to the same school, had the same friends. There was nothing reassuring about waking up and knowing you were home. There was something reassuring about waking up and knowing you were home. Hopefully, Levi would get to the point where he would feel like this was home to him. I watched transfixed as more of Levi's, not Leah's, Levi's hair came cascading down around his chair. The stylist didn't talk much, concentrating on the angles of his hair. When she was done cutting and styling, she turned Levi's chair around and he faced me. I hardly recognized him. His hair was now only about an inch long at the top. It appeared darker, more dirty blonde, probably since his newer hair hadn't seen much sun. "What do you think?" Levi asked, eyes wide. "I like it. I really did, even if it was the same haircut most of the guys in school had." "Really?" He was staring at himself in the mirror. "You really like it?" "Yes. I came over and couldn't help but run my fingers through it. It's so short, but it looks nice on you." Levi trembled at my touch, probably not used to having anything or anyone be so close to his neck. He jumped out of the chair. "Let's do something." I thought we were doing something. We're at the mall." He groaned. "You know that's what I meant. Let's go play mini-golf or go to the park or do something." I glanced at my watch. "I can't. I have to get everything ready for tonight." His shoulders sank down in defeat. "Okay, but Mom's really insisting on bringing something, and she only gets annoyed at me when I say you don't need anything." "I don't want her to bring anything. This is my supper for you guys, a thank you to your family for everything, and a celebration for us that school's starting next week." He shook his head. "You're the only person who gets excited that school's starting. Haven't we had an awesome summer?" It had been a great summer, but I still craved the discipline the school year gave me. I still needed the distractions. I knew Dad was only trying to help, but had everything planned down to the minute. I'd taken some cooking classes at the Y over the summer and had been getting better at it. I was making a salad while the lasagna was baking in the oven. "You sure you don't need anything?" he asked for the 7th time. "Seriously, Dad, I've got it. Please go do something, anything. Go watch TV with Adam." He chuckled. "You sound exactly like your mother." It was the first time he'd mentioned Mom without getting sad. Instead, he was laughing. Of course, he was laughing at me, but I didn't have time to get upset about it. I had garlic bread to toast. Luckily, the doorbell saved me, and Dad went to let Levi and his parents in. I heard a scattering of their greetings. "Smells amazing!" Mrs. Rogers greeted me in the kitchen. "I don't want to be in your way at all. I only wanted you to know that it all smells delicious." Dad followed her with a bottle of wine in his hand, most likely a gift from Levi's parents. Then I saw Levi and almost didn't recognize him with his new haircut. It took me a second to realize he had flowers in his hand. His dad came behind him and gestured. "Oh yeah," Levi said, taking the cue. For the chef." He handed me the flowers, his cheeks ruddy from embarrassment. "Thanks." I hastily grabbed them. Levi's dad winked at Mrs. Rogers before giving me a hug. I was especially honored that Dr. Rogers could make it. He worked such long hours. He usually didn't make it home in time for supper at his own house. I shooed them all out of the kitchen so I could finish the meal. I couldn't help but smile when their voices and laughter drifted into the kitchen. It was nice to have joyful noise fill the house again. Every once in a while I'd hear Adam groan and knew that Levi was trash-talking about the upcoming football season. You'd think he learned to keep his affinity for the Bears on the down low in Packers country. The timer on the oven dinged just as I put the salad on the dining room table. We hadn't eaten there since my 10th birthday. There hadn't been much reason to celebrate or break out the good china in a while. I looked over the table one last time before calling them in, make sure everything was in place. I felt my chest swell with pride as everybody came in and made a fuss. Once everybody dug in, quiet fell over the table, except for the occasional compliment on the salad. I then served the lasagna with garlic bread before bringing out the chocolate cake I made for dessert. Oh my god, I love chocolate cake. Not just chocolate cake, I just love cake in general. And desserts. Anyway. "Cake too," Mrs. Rogers. She doesn't sound like a mother. Work on it. "Cake too." Mrs. Rogers patted her slim waist. "I'm glad I signed up for back-to-back spin class tomorrow morning." "Oh," I said. "The cake's only from a box. I haven't started any baking courses yet." "You don't need baking courses, hon. You just do it. Okay? Yeah. You try." Okay. Her eyes got wide. "Honey, this is all amazing. I now feel like I need to get up my game next time you come over for dinner." I wanted to get up and hug her. Sitting around the table with everybody together made me realize how much I missed moments like that. I'd forgotten what it was like to enjoy a meal together as a family. We'd gotten into the habit of making sandwiches or ordering in. We needed to have the TV on to fill in the silence, because sometimes silence speaks much louder than words possibly could. It was then that I knew this would be the first of many family meals we'd have together. I wanted to start a tradition with this new growing family. Sure, the Rogers and I weren't related, but family doesn't have to be blood relations only. I think family is more a state of mind. You know, that reminds me. Dad put his finger in the air. I've been meaning to have a conversation about the school year. I'm fine with McKellen being dropped off here on Wednesday, or any day really. She's been babysitting around the neighborhood and spending a lot of time here by herself during the summer, so she doesn't have to come over to your house. Both Levi and I exchanged a look. I was pretty sure it was the same look, or at least I hoped it was. I liked going to his house and hanging out with him and his mom. I didn't like coming home to a house that was empty of people, yet full of memories. Both Levi and Dad continued. I think I've been a little overprotective. Our little girl is almost in high school. I can't believe it. Dad's eyes drifted to a spot on the wall right behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I knew what was there, a photo of my parents' first dance on their wedding day. Dad had said something funny to my mom because they were both laughing. We love having McKellen over, Mrs. Rogers said. I immediately felt better. Right, Levi? I found myself holding my breath. I knew Levi wanted to make some more guy friends, but I hoped that wouldn't mean we couldn't still hang out. We talked about things that I couldn't with my girlfriends. I liked not always obsessing over boys or what we were wearing the next day. Levi and I talked about real things, and he made me laugh more than anybody had been able to do in years. Levi looked straight at my dad. It wouldn't be the same without her, Mr. Dietz. I was so relieved to hear his response that my eyes began to burn. I got up and started clearing the table. Levi did the same. Once we set the plates down on the counter in the kitchen, he gave me that crooked smile of his. Dude, that was close. Blimey, if I'd know what to do without you. I felt the exact same way. When we got our schedules for 8th grade, we discovered that the unthinkable had happened. Emily, Levi, Danielle, and I had been split up for lunch. Just can someone explain this to me? Because, I don't live in the United States. What is with the lunch is at a different time for people? So can you have lunch in the morning? Is that a thing? Can you have lunch at the end of the day? Because at my school, we just have lunch all at the same time. When everyone's blocks are finished, it's all at the same time. Everyone has lunch at the same time. So can just, someone tell me? Because I've read so many books, from the United States or whatever, and every time it says that, I'm like, what's the deal? Sorry, just had to ask that. Anyway. Emily and Levi had first lunch, while Daniel and I were relegated to second lunch. Emily was the most concerned about the lunch disaster, which surprised me. She'd always been the type of person who can walk into any room and start a conversation with a stranger, but she was uncharacteristically worried about 8th grade. All summer she kept saying that this would have to be our best year since none of us knew what would happen next year when we got to high school. A lot of this fear, I knew, was because Emily's older sister had gone, to quote Emily, from it girl to so last season, once she got to South Lake High School. I found myself extremely anxious on Levi's behalf while I was in history class. Was Emily sitting with him? Would she have abandoned him to sit with some of her cheerleading friends or Troy, her current crush? My worries faded once I got to the hallway and saw Emily and Levi walking together, laughing about something. Hey, Emily greeted me. Stay away from the sandwiches at lunch. They're super soggy. Emily winked at Levi. I felt a slight pang of jealousy rise up inside me, which I instantly knew was silly. I wanted Levi and Emily to be friends. Emily offered to walk me to my locker after we bid Levi goodbye. At least I'd see him later in English. She linked her arm with mine. You didn't tell me Levi got a haircut. He's so cute. Oh, was the only response I could think of. So, she let the word hang in the air. I knew what was coming. I decided to cut her off at the pass. What's going on with Troy? I asked. Emily had a new crush at the start of every school year. It always went like this. Emily declared a crush. She let her crush be known. The guy asked her out. They dated, and then she moved on to her next crush. She'd had 8 legitimate boyfriends before the start of 8th grade. I always teased her that she'd run out of boys by the time we hit senior prom, but she promised she'd move on to college guys by then. I had no doubt this would be true. Ugh, Troy, I don't know. She gave me a look that made it clear she did know. Levi's still this total mystery. Will you talk to him for me? I no longer had an appetite for lunch. Did I really want my best friend dating Levi had become one of my best friends too. I had flashes in my head of having to be their go-between and their referee. But then I realized that having my two best friends date could be a good thing. I sometimes felt I had to choose between hanging out with one or the other. Now we could all hang out in a group. Sure, I offered. After all, what was the worst that could happen? I don't think I gave you enough credit for your positive attitude. Yes, I'm Queen Optimist. Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I was being sarcastic. Really? I'd rather be cautious than assume that everything will just work out. It's called being laid back, or unrealistic, but whatever works for you. Exactly, whatever works. Chapter 4. Had I known that getting a haircut was going to make me a chick magnet, I would have shaved my head the second we arrived in Wisconsin. I could tell that Emily was acting differently at lunch our first day back, but I assumed it was because McCallum wasn't around. Then she started doing all the stuff girls do to let you know they're interested in you. She threw her head back after I said something that wasn't that funny. Then she kept touching my arm and gazing into my eyes. At first I thought that maybe she'd lost her mind over summer break. Then it dawned on me. Emily was flirting. It wasn't that a girl had never flirted with me before. I'd had a few girlfriends back home, but ever since I'd arrived in cheese country, I hadn't had any girls pay any attention to me in that way. I wasn't sure if I could tell McCallum about Emily. I knew McCallum and I were just friends, but people always talked about us like we were a couple. And when they did, McCallum usually scrunched her nose or did something that made it clear that the mere thought made her stomach turn, which was a little harsh, but I knew where she was coming from. Then when McCallum told me that Emily was interested in me and even helped me to ask Emily on a date, it sort of cemented it. McCallum and I would never be like that. We were just friends. That's how she saw me, and maybe we were better off being only friends. Which was cool, especially since she was my best friend here. I decided to surprise her with a special treat after school. I told Mom not to pick us up so it'd be only the two of us. Where are we going? She asked when I took a left turn instead of a right. It's a surprise. I grabbed her elbow and led her down the street. Okay, she sounded like she didn't trust me. Have you decided what you guys are going to do on Friday? Who wants to know? I found myself asking that a lot that week. Any time McCallum inquired about my upcoming date, I wasn't sure if she was curious or if she was getting intel for Emily. I am. I wanted to see if you needed any advice on what to do. Oh, I felt stupid for sounding paranoid. I figured we'd get something to eat and see a movie. Is that too boring? Sounds good to me. There aren't a lot of options around here. Yeah, same as back home. McCallum's shoulders tensed. I was about to ask her if I'd done something wrong, but we were approaching our destination. Look, I pointed up at the Culver's marquee. Her eyes got wide. Yes, you know Turtle's my favorite. Yes, I do. When we drove by this morning, I saw that it was the custard flavor of the day. I knew we had to come here. My treat. McCallum smiled as we entered the restaurant and got in line. Well, if it's your treat, I'm getting 4 scoops. As expected. I think I may get a double butter burger, too. Gotta get more weight on. I patted my stomach. I wanted to be able to get onto a few teams next year in high school, but I was still the skinniest guy in our class. I figured between you becoming a culinary master and all the deep-fried food in this town, I would have gained some weight by now. What a hardship, she shook her head. Probably not the best idea to bring up in front of Emily the plight that is your inability to gain weight. She's tiny, but that doesn't mean she isn't self-conscious about her weight. That's so ridiculous. I've never gotten why girls have, the most messed up idea of what they look like. Emily's body is, This is the part where having our best friend be a girl and got tricky. I couldn't really say sick like I would to my friends back home. She's not fat. Nowhere near it. Neither are you. You're both, totally, fine. McCallum folded her arms over her chest. I decided it would be best to keep my mouth shut. I knew I made her uncomfortable. McCallum had recently started growing in, specific places. I couldn't help but notice that her shirts were fitting differently. I was only a guy, and therefore a human. Very, very human. I shook my head to try to get the image of McCallan in her purpley v-neck shirt out of my head. Thankfully, it was our turn to order. Once we got our custards, we grabbed a table. So, any other topics of conversation I should avoid on Friday? I asked while McCallan happily dived into her vanilla custard with caramel, chocolate, and pecans. Oh, that sounds so good. I love custard. She nodded. It's best not to talk about next year. She's really paranoid about going to high school. As she explained about Emily's sister and everything, I made mental notes. There seemed to be a lot of things that I would have to be cautious about on Friday. It wasn't like with McCallan, where we could pretty much talk about anything. Well, except current growth spurts. Yeah, I know I stopped myself as McCallan's gaze settled on something over in the corner. I looked to see that some older kids were picking on an employee who was clearing off a few tables in the back room. They were pointing and laughing at him. I couldn't tell why until he turned around and saw that he must have had Down syndrome or something. Are those guys? She cut me off. It's ridiculous. He shouldn't have to deal with this. Her cheeks became extremely flushed. Should I go look for a manager? I offered. But McCallum had a different idea. She got up and headed over to the corner. I hesitated for a second, but realized that I should be there in case she needed some help. Is there a problem? She said to these three guys, who were probably 16 or 17. Oh, is that your girlfriend? One of them asked. I was used to the question being directed at me, but instead it was aimed at the guy who was trying to wipe down the table next to them. Oops, another guy dumped soda on the floor. Better go clean that up, retard. Excuse me? McCallan's voice boomed through the seating area. Even some people in line started turning around to see what was going on. I wasn't talking to you, the guys started laughing. McCallan stood in front of the table. Well, you are now. The guys were snickering and saying some things I couldn't make out. Then McCallan slammed her fists on the table. The guy who appeared to be the ringleader jumped a little. What's your problem? McCallum asked, her entire body shaking. All he's doing is working, minding his own business, cleaning up after slobs like you. He's making a tribute to society, which is a lot more than I can say about you. So what's the real waste of space in this scenario? A manager approached. Is everything okay? The guy all mumbled that it was fine, but McCallum wasn't going to let him off that easily. No, everything is not okay. These gentlemen, she said the word with such disdain, were harassing your employee, who is, I might add, doing excellent work. Yes, the manager, who looked to be around the same age as the guys causing the problem, said. Hank is one of our best employees. Hank, why don't you take a break? Hank took his towels and trays from the table and walked away. The manager waited for Hank to be out of earshot before he turned his attention back to the table. I think I'm going to need to ask you gentlemen to leave. They laughed. Whatever, we were going anyway. As I got up to leave, one of them brushed past me and said, You need to learn to put a muzzle on your girlfriend. I had been frozen the entire time. McCallum stood up to those three guys while I'd stood there like an idiot. McCallum talked a little bit with the manager before he thanked her for stepping in. Oh, her! Well, I didn't know. Damn. Okay. It's great what you did. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. It shouldn't, McCallum said coldly. Oh. Okay, I think that was the manager. It's great what you did. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. It shouldn't, McCallum said coldly. Once we were back at our table, just the two of us again, I asked, Are you okay? No, I hate people like that. They think they're so much better than Hank, and they probably think they're better than you or me. What kills me is that those jerks get to walk down the street and nobody ever judges them. I can guarantee you that Adam works a lot harder in one day than those guys ever will in their lifetimes. I'd never seen McCallum so mad. I knew she had very little tolerance for crap, but I had no idea how much it would set her off. You're right, I told her. I'm really proud of you. I also know to never make you angry. That was something else. A smile started to form her face. Sorry, I can't help myself. No, I'm serious. That was awesome. I never saw you as the confronting type. Lesson learned. Only when someone's being bullied, I guess. Let's get out of here. I think this calls for a Buggy and Floyd marathon. And some more custard. That was the McCallum I knew. Like I'd say no to you now. She laughed as we headed back in line. I poked her in the ribs. I'm telling you, no girl back home is as cool as you. McCallum froze again. I immediately looked around to see if the guys were back. You know, she turned toward me. I understand that you spent your first 12 years in California, but this is your home now. I wasn't sure why she was suddenly annoyed at me. I don't know, she interrupted. You keep saying back home all the time. I don't. She slouched her shoulders and did this low voice. Yeah, my buddy's back home. Back home. We did this. Back home was all like this, and back home is awesome. I think she was doing an impersonation of me, but I so didn't talk with that exaggerated valley accent she was doing. Don't know what that is, so don't do that accent. At least I hoped. I didn't. She fixed her gaze on me. This is your new home. She moved forward and ordered her second custard, and I stood there thinking about what she had said. Maybe I was still living in the past. Maybe I hadn't realized that this move was permanent. Maybe it was time for me to start living in the present, to embrace my new school and my new classmates. Maybe I hadn't made enough of an effort. I had to face the fact that I was now Wisconsinite. I stopped looking at everything, especially school, as temporary. I was going to have to find a way to get comfortable at school and with the guys. But first I had the little matter of my date with Emily. We were sitting across from each other like we did every day at school for lunch, but this was different. Not just because we were at a pizza place before the movie. This was a date, and it wasn't any date. It was a date with the hottest girl at school and McKellen's best friend. This was a big deal. Emily always looked pretty at school, but she went all out that night. I almost didn't know what to do when I met her at the mall. She had on this flowery dress, and her hair had one of those sparkly barrettes in it. And every time she smiled at me, I got a little nauseous. Not the I'm gonna hurl nauseous, the this is exciting one. I took an extra big sip of my soda as Emily smiled at me while we waited for our pizza. It was like she was expecting something witty, something more than our usual dissection of the school day. So, she wrapped one of her loose strands of hair around her finger. So, was my witty reply. She reached her other hand out to me. I'm so glad we're doing this. Me too. Look, I swore I knew how to talk to girls. I talked to McCallan all the time, but I became worried that I'd used up all my small talk with Emily at school. I'm thinking of having a Halloween party, Emily said as her fingers kept twisting her hair. I wasn't the only one who was a little nervous. That could be fun. She nodded. Yeah, especially since I was thinking that I'd invite all the guys, like Keith and Troy. Troy's cool, and the only guy who really gave me the time of day. Yeah, I feel like it would be good for you to spend some time with the guys. I hated that it was so obvious to everybody how I wasn't one of the guys here. I swallowed my ever-shrinking pride. Thanks. Don't worry about it. Even I need to make sure to get in good with everybody. That surprised me. Emily was one of the most popular girls in school. She continued. Especially Keith. Ever since we were little, he was always the one with the biggest circle of friends. He'd have the birthday parties everybody wanted to be invited to. That's not going to change for him. He'll have no problems fitting in next year. But the new school is going to be so big. I'm worried about getting lost. Her voice got quiet and she sank down in her seat a bit. Emily was usually also bright and bubbly. I felt like I was getting a deeper glance. I don't know. I guess I'm thinking too much. I like the little circle we have now, and I feel things already changed so much with you moving here. I mean, I see McCallum less. Emily's eyes got wide, like she knew she shouldn't have said that. Before I could say I didn't mean to take McCallum away from Emily, she jumped back and said, she just fumbled for a second. I like having you here. I hope you don't think it's that. No, I totally get it. But anyway, she straightened up, and I knew the conversation was going to go back to the Strovers as well. I know one person who won't have any trouble staying on Keith's radar next year. She raised her eyebrows playfully. I had no clue who she was referring to. It certainly wasn't me. McCallan. He used to have the biggest crush on her. He probably still does. I was pretty sure my elbows almost came out of their sockets. Emily laughed. Are you shocked that a guy would be interested in McCallan? No, not at all. I actually found it strange that she never really talked about guys to me. I figured that was left to her girlfriends. Yeah, it was 6th grade, but she didn't really have any interest in Keith or anything really after her mom. Emily's unfinished sentence hung over us like a dark cloud. I had always avoided the topic of McCallan's mom. I knew I was supposed to say how sorry I was if it ever came up, but it never came up. McCallan always talked to me about her dad, her uncle in school, but she hardly ever talked about her mom. I don't know how she holds up as well as she does. I was surprised that not only these words came from my mouth, but how small my voice sounded. Emily dropped her head a bit. It was awful. It was so awful. Wish she could have seen McCallum when her mom was around. She was a different person. She was always smiling and laughing. It's not like she's all brooding now, but it was a lot. I was sure a lot was putting it mildly. But I have to tell you, she's gotten much better lately. Like whenever she starts talking about her cooking classes or the new recipes she's trying out. And also, I don't know if you realize how much your mom has helped her. I nodded. It was pretty clear that McCallum adored my mom. It made me realize how lucky I was to have her around, to have both my parents around, even though I got annoyed with how much time my dad spent at the hospital. Oh, Emily started bouncing up and down her seat. I've got it. I think I should ask McCallum to make some food for the Halloween party. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, she'll love that. I started thinking about all the food McCallum's been making. Do you think you could ask her to make those pulled pork sandwiches? Definitely, Emily beamed. We missed the 7 o'clock movie, and the one after that. Emily and I kept talking and talking. All the nerves we both felt started to melt away. The only other time I got nervous that evening was when we said goodbye, because I wanted to kiss her. Not just because she was cute, but because, for the first time since I'd arrived, I had something to look forward to that didn't involve McCallum. So I kissed her, and she kissed me back. I wasn't going to let any other opportunities pass me by. Generally, when a guy gets a girlfriend, he usually ends up spending less time with his guy friends. But with Emily, it was the opposite. Before I knew it, I was starting to hang out with Keith and Troy. We went to this mall to get our costumes for Emily's Halloween party. We ended up grabbing a few slices and talking about sports. I hadn't had that much bro time since we left California. I even got excited when Keith picked on me for spending so much time with McCallum without making a move. I took it as a compliment that he was ribbing me. It meant I was in. Have I told you you're the greatest boyfriend? Emily pecked me on the cheek as I put the last of the fake cobwebs in her living room the night of the party. Not today, I winked at her. She laughed before surveying the room for one last inspection before people arrived. We moved the furniture so there was a large area for people to hang out and maybe dance. We had a table set up on the side that had a punch bowl filled with green slime, which was basically green-colored punch, and chips, dip, pretzels, candy, and a lot of room left for McCallum's food. Nom 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 nom. McCallum, as with everything, outdid herself. There were many mummy pizzas, where black olives were used as eyes, deviled eggs that had peppers sticking out like horns so the eggs looked like devils, cupcakes decorated with candy corn, and of course her famous to me pulled pork sandwiches. This all looked amazing, McCallum. Emily hugged her. Our group had decided to dress up with a grease thing. Yes! Oh my god, I love grease. Best thing. The girls were going as the pink ladies, while the guys were the T-birds. Emily was dressed as Sandy, with a leather jacket and all black with red shoes. Her normally sleek black hair had been curled and teased beyond recognition. If Emily was Sandley, I guess that made me Danny. The guys had it easy. We only had to get white t-shirts and write T-birds on them. Some of us had leather jackets. I borrowed my dad's old motorcycle jacket from when he had a motorcycle. Mom had made him get rid of it once she got pregnant with me. The girls took pink t-shirts and wrote pink ladies in bubble letters, and then wore poodle skirts with matching pink headbands and flip hairdos. Mr. Dietz, Adam, and Emily's parents hung out in the kitchen while the party took over the living and dining rooms. Most of the guys who weren't in our group dressed up as football players or cowboys, which meant a plaid shirt and cowboy hat. It was the girls who'd gone above the beyond. Beauty queen pageants, Catholic schoolgirls, or basically anything that required them to dress up and put on a lot of makeup. Not like I was complaining. Hey, California! Keith called out from his station in front of the TV. You're up! He threw me a gaming remote and I plunked down next to him. We played video games for an hour or so. Every once in a while, he could give me a grief about my accent. Okay, I want to know what the hell his accent's like, just so I can try to mimic it. It's kind of too late. Just kind of want to know. Which was the exact same. Every once in a while, he'd give me grief about my accent. My outfit, which was the exact same as his. My hair, which had been short for 2 months, but Keith had failed to notice. and pretty much anything I said, but I ate it up. This was how Keith treated his friends. Dude, next weekend, my house. You in? He said after I finally beat him at a boxing game. I had no idea what next weekend was or what we'd be doing at his house, but I agreed. I had a girlfriend, an amazing best friend, and was finally becoming one of the guys. Things were starting to look up. Don't think I'm not offended that you're so desperate for some bro time. Dude, you know I didn't mean it that way. Dude, you make it seem like I force you to have tea parties with my dolls and braid my hair. You did start spending a lot of time in the kitchen. That's funny. I don't remember hearing you complain while you were eating all the food I was making. That's because you're the best cook in the state of Wisconsin, if not the entire culinary world. Flattery will get you everywhere. Don't I know it?